recap very quickly. We were speaking about this unity with God through Torah and Mitzvot. We spoke about also the ultimate unity, the ultimate love that is selfless. If I love someone for what that person brings to me, then I don't really love that someone. I love myself, right? Remember that? I love the pleasure that the person brings me. Therefore, I love myself. And very often we use God in that way. We think that we love God. We love what God brings us, so we love ourselves. And the ultimate unity is when it's completely selfless. That was one big idea last week. And we were just transitioning to this idea of or pnimi and or makif, which means the inner light and the outer light, or the encompassing light, as he translates it. And the inner light is really light that is absorbed by us through the study of Torah. Study of Torah has to be accomplished with our insides, so to speak, with our minds, with our heart. And then the mitzvot really represent this encompassing light of God, because the mitzvot are performed for the world, for the outside, for that which encompasses us. So there's two different lights that we draw down, two different divine lights that we draw down, one through the study of Torah, which is the inner light or pnimi, and one through the fulfillment of mitzvot, or makif, which is the encompassing light. Let's continue. Like you just said, Margot, at the bottom of page 153 right here. Therefore, as sages, does anyone want to read? Bottom of 153.
Oh, good.
Good.
Margot.
Ah, from one Margot to the other. Okay, let's go.
Turn on your volume.
Yeah, you're on mute. Yeah.
I was wondering about that.
Okay.
Therefore, our sages of blessed memory have said that the study of the Torah equals all the mitzvot, for the commandments are but garments. The Talmud describes study of the Torah as being equal to all the other mitzvot put together. This says the Tanya can be understood in light of what has been said here in regard to the mitzvot being garments of the soul. This is not to say that a mitzvah is a superficial act. A person can perform a mitzvah out of deep inner feelings, out of love and awe of God, out of devekut, deep spiritual attachment to the Almighty. Yet the mitzvah itself remains external to the person, a reality distinct from himself, an encompassing reality. The mitzvah is a reality that envelops him and to which he deeply relates, but he cannot internalize it and assimilate its essence. A physical mitzvah, such as tzitzit or lulav or tefillin, is an action that a person does, but not something that merges with him to become part of his being. For this reason, our sages have said that a mitzvah protects a person from harm only at the instant he is performing it, because no perceivable trace of the mitzvah remains after the act in the person who performed it.
Right. So again, the whole purpose of the mitzvah is for this world, not really for us. It's what we ought to do in this world and for this world, right? So when we, for example, we give tzedakah, or like he said, we shake the lulav, or put on tzitzit or tefillin, it's really to draw God's light down to this world in a way that it benefits the world. And therefore, that's where that light stays, because its intention, the mitzvah, the intention of the mitzvah is indeed to direct that light towards the world, not towards us. And that's why, again, the mitzvah that a person does, that physical mitzvah, and by the way, most mitzvahs are very, very physical, again, relating and reflecting the idea of the mitzvah, that it has to be in this physical world, that it has to be carried out for this physical world. Most mitzvahs are physical, but when we do a mitzvah, again, we don't necessarily internalize that light, even though it certainly has an impact on us, but that's because, again, the light by default has to be drawn or directed towards the outside. So that's really the big idea of the mitzvah, as opposed to Torah. Torah has to be absorbed through the mind, through the heart. That can be internalized and should be internalized. Torah is meant for us and for each and every individual being to in a way nourish their souls, like he was saying before. Mitzvahs is to nourish the world, not to nourish our souls. And that's why they really have two opposite, or two, not opposite, but two different lights and two different directions. So that's the idea. I just want to expound on one thing here, and then again open this up, because as always, I don't want this to be a monologue, but I just want to expand on one thing, and that is that the last part of what Rabbi Strauss was referring to, another passage from the Talmud that says that a mitzvah protects you while you're doing it. Torah protects you while you're studying it, and even after you studied it, you still have this protection from the Torah. Because again, the inner light of the Torah remains with you. So that protection, therefore, is always there. The outer light of the mitzvah goes to the world, goes to benefit the world. And therefore, it doesn't necessarily stay with you. Unless you're in the act of doing a mitzvah, then it still protects you, because you're drawing down that light at that very moment by doing that mitzvah. So mitzvah protects you while you're doing it. Now, I want to add just the flip side of that. What Rabbi Strauss is hinting to, not saying directly here, is that although mitzvahs are not protecting us, because again, they are done for this world, they are protecting the world. Each time we do a mitzvah, it just imagine it this way. Each time we do a mitzvah, it really creates this shield for the world. Each time we do a mitzvah in our home, for example, our home is shielded. Each time we do a mitzvah in the street, that street is shielded. Which brings us to the big idea that the more mitzvahs there are in the world, the more protected this world is, the better this world becomes. And maybe this is why the big idea of tikkun olam, an expression that is so overused these days, stems from this prayer of letaken olam b'malchut shakai, that we should repair God's world with the kingship of God. The word that is used is repair, tikkun, letaken. Why? Because by doing a mitzvah, we are repairing that which is broken in this world by adding a shield to it. It's like it's almost like cement to a home, or I don't know, or surgery to a broken body. You're repairing. It's a shield, and that shield is what eventually will also redeem the world. And that's why Maimonides famously says that a person should always see this world as if it is on an even scale, and the sides of that scale have all mitzvahs and then all sins. And if a person does one mitzvah, he can tip the scale and bring about the entire world its final redemption. Because sometimes all that is needed is that last touch, that last shield, and then the world is fully protected, shielded by God. That's what true redemption means, that the world now is completely divine. So there's this idea that we may not be protecting ourselves when we do a mitzvah, or after the mitzvah is done. When we do a mitzvah, yes, but after the mitzvah is done, that shield doesn't stay with us, but it certainly stays with the world. And it's something to bear in mind. We should never underestimate the power of a mitzvah, because it adds to the shield of the world. I think that you don't have to be so in tune to feel that shield when you walk into a home, for example, when you walk into a room, any room, whether it's a room that's shielded by God and that has that energy, or it's a room that is void of God and void of that shield, and it's too vulnerable to human mistakes and human lowly behaviors. And that, again, is because mitzvahs come to really shield this world, protect this world, and you feel it when you walk into a room full of mitzvahs. So that's the other side of what Rabbi Strauss is saying here. But I do want to open this up to any ideas, any comments, disagreements. Ronnie, good to have you back. Yes, please. Oh, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Better?
There you go. Yes, yes.
All right. So this is very important what we're discussing here. And I believe I believe a little differently than what Rabbi Steinsaltz was saying or what you were saying today.
Okay.
And I think it's important that we do mitzvahs and that it does affect the physical mitzvahs we do, it does affect who we are and what we are. It's the practice. The more we practice doing mitzvahs, the more we change. Our soul, our human being changes. And it's only when the human being changes that we can do even bigger mitzvahs or more mitzvahs. But it's a practice. Mitzvahs, doing a mitzvah does do something to us internally. I
Right.
believe that. And anybody who says differently, I would totally like to discuss that. So you said it differently. And so do you not think the practice of mitzvah changes a person?
No doubt. No doubt it does. But the change we're talking about here, I think is a different type of change. Absolutely. And you know, we've said so many times that we are what we do, right? Because eventually that our deeds define us. And much more than our intentions, for example. But the change that we're talking about here is regarding this light. And maybe we should delve into that a little bit more. So there's the or pnimi and the or makif that we were speaking about. What is drawn down through the deed of the mitzvah, of the physical mitzvah, is this encompassing light that really is drawn down for the world, not necessarily for us. Now, we drew it down, and in a way, it maybe surrounds us. It's an encompassing light, so it surrounds us. And when you live in a home of light, for example, the home might not be a part of you, but it's still your home, and it surrounds you with light because it's a home of light. Then certainly it changes the person. But I think Rabbi Stans and the Tanya are emphasizing that this light is an encompassing light to remind ourselves that when we do a mitzvah, we're not doing it for ourselves. The mitzvah is for the world. And
it's true. That's true. We're not doing it for ourselves. It is for the world. But when we do it, it does change who we are and what we are.
yeah, fine.
And taking care of ourselves allows us to take care of the world even more.
Right.
So that mitzvah we're doing does change us. We don't do it for the purpose of making ourselves better, but it does make ourselves better.
Right.
As a result.
No, absolutely. It certainly changes a person and certainly elevates a person when a person does a mitzvah. But again, the purpose of the mitzvah is not for us to necessarily use it selfishly, but it's again,
so that's an important word that you said, the purpose of the mitzvah. You didn't mention about what's the purpose of the mitzvah before. Having a you do a mitzvah to do a mitzvah, not for a purpose. You do it because it's to be done.
All right, good. I wish everyone knew that. That's right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Rabbi, I have a question. I can't remember the exact context, but you said, like, let's say a place that you're in is void of God. And I'm questioning that because I don't know, isn't God omnipresent?
Right. God is omnipresent. God is everywhere. The question is, if we allow him, it's like the Kotzker Rebbe would say, where is God? Where you let him in.
That's right.
That's what he would say, right? Where now God is there no matter what. He's the constant creator of this world, as Tanya explains in a different place, right? For God to create this world, he needs to be involved in this creation all the time because it's a creation that's ex nihilo, something from nothing. It's not something from something. When we create something from something, then the creator can just leave that something after it's created and say goodbye to it, and the creation still continues to exist. If it's a creation of something from nothing, then it's a creation that needs to have the creator constantly involved. Otherwise, it reverts to its original state, which is nothing. Now, therefore, God is omnipresent, like you say, because he is constantly involved in his creation, even the parts of the creation that do not agree with God, unfortunately, that oppose God, but he's still there. The question is whether God in that room, right, that we were speaking about, is revealed, whether he's there just as the behind the scene creator, or whether he's there really as the main player on that center stage. That depends on us. And yeah, that's what I was referring to. Yeah.
Right.
Now, what brings God onto that center stage is, again, going back to this idea, is the mitzvahs that we do. That enables God that invites God into the room.
But just another question that came to my mind as I was listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
Does God want to be on center stage?
Well, he created this world, so I guess he does.
It just is.
You know, the Tanya says elsewhere and quotes the Zohar that says, "Nitava lo kadosh baruch hu dira b'tachtonim." God desired a dwelling place here below, in this lowly world. So God certainly desires to be in the center stage, but
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say he desires to be on center stage. He just desires to be part of the world.
right. So the thing is this, you know, when we say that he wants to be on the center stage, I mean, the automatic association is a theater, a play where you have an actor in the center stage. God doesn't want to be alone in that center stage. It's not like that theater. God wants to partner with us to be at that center stage. So I would add that note. I think that it's important to note that God wants us to invite him to that center stage, be with him on that center stage, and be in sync with him on that center stage.
To be one with God.
Right.
To be one with God.
Right.
And for God to be one with us.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. Now, I just want to add one thing, and that is that, you know, God can do everything. If God wanted, he could be on that center stage with or without us. God is the omnipotent, as we call him too, not just the omnipresent. But I think the whole idea of, I just want to reconnect it to the mitzvah, the whole idea of doing mitzvahs. By the way, the word mitzvah comes from the word, we've said this before, comes from the word savta, which means partnership. That means that when we do a mitzvah, we partner with God. We unite with God in that sense. The whole idea of doing a mitzvah is really allowing God to become a part of ourselves, of the world, to the point that the center stage is not really a center stage anymore. I just want to make that point. It's not a center stage. Center stage means that you focus on the center and the rest of the stage is not important. Here, the entire stage, the whole room, the whole theater becomes a vehicle for God. It's not just the center of it. And that's achieved through mitzvahs. That all-encompassing light has to go even to the chairs of the spectators. The whole room turns into the stage. It's not just, that's why I didn't swallow the word center stage too easily. God wants his presence to be felt everywhere, even in the chairs of the spectators. Yes, Rabbi Eisen, please.
Kavod Harav, but maybe I could I explain this a little bit differently as it's come to me.
Sure.
It would be the difference. Let's take the very specific example of giving tzedakah. Someone sees a pushkin and says, I have an obligation to kein olam b'malchut shaddai, to do what I can to help the world. Okay, that's God center stage. Whereas the person at the UGA rally, which raises hands, and I give $1,000 anonymously, I'm not sure that's really a mitzvah given, l'shem shamayim, so to speak, for the sake of heaven. So perhaps getting back to what you were talking about last week, especially in Buberian speak, where it's I, it, or I, thou, that when you say center stage, I would see it as encountering the world through God, or being God-centered in everything we do, having that kavanah when we do an act, that we're not doing, if I walk by a kosher deli and walk in because I'm hungry, it just happens to be the first door on the right, am I fulfilling the mitzvah of keeping kosher? Well, maybe not. Whereas if I say, when I'm hungry, let me see, I've got some choices here. I go to Labella's, I go to well, 613 is gone now, but Kitchen 18, there are different places I can go. Well, that's different. Okay, so I think when you say center stage, it means that the focus of what we're doing is in response to God, not just to ourselves.
Right. No, very well said. Very well said. I think it starts with the intention of why am I doing this? Right. You know, Oscar Wilde, you just remind me. Oscar Wilde famously said that the best feeling in the world is to do a good deed anonymously and then have someone found out about it. Like the UJA guy, I'm donating anonymously. But anyway, but yes, absolutely. Absolutely, right. Right. You know, I will use the words of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, the famous Hasidic master who was also known as the advocate of Israel, always finding a positive perspective on everything, even that which seems so negative. But Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev would say that to his community very often in Berditchev, he would say that I will know that God exists in this congregation when even the sheep that you shepherd, even the sheep start singing songs for God. And in a way, I think that he was referring not just to the animals, to the sheep themselves, but the sheep in us, even those selfish parts in us that are animalistic, right? The animal soul that Tanya was speaking about, that wants to eat that sandwich because it loves pastrami sandwiches. But that sheep says, no, you know what? I'm going to do it for God. Singing a song for God through the pastrami sandwich. Then we know that really God exists even in that congregation or within us. Yes, Rabbi. Yes.
So another question, which goes back to the text itself that we're looking at, we said that the study of Torah, okay, Keneged Kulam, okay, equals all the mitzvot. So how do you define Torah study? I took courses in Jewish mysticism in undergraduate school, and it wasn't Tanya time, so to speak. The Tanya was not that widely distributed. But I can tell you that we would not have approached it this way. We looked at it very differently. I mean, like Gershom Scholem, the godfather of the study of Jewish mysticism, looks at things much differently than Steinsaltz did.
Right.
I mean, so which is the study of Torah, which is greater than all commandments? And parallel to that is, when talking about the light, I mean, I've seen people that are most pious spiritual individuals I've ever met. And when they live Jewishly, they're living with all their heart, with all their soul, with all their might, fulfilling every mitzvah they come. But they don't know how to open a book, or they can't open a book, or are they denied that other light? I mean, where's the balance? We live in a much more bifurcated world than this allows. And I'm just wondering where the entrance and exit ramps are, so to speak.
Right. So that's a great question. How to define Torah study? So. And that's the next topic here. So we spoke about mitzvahs, then the Torah study comes. The Tanya will be speaking about Torah study, but I would say it's like a marital relationship. I really believe that's the case. So there are three types of conversations in general that I can have with my wife. One conversation is, hey, what do you want to do tonight? Let's go have a good dinner at a good restaurant. Let's go watch a sports game. Let's do a movie or whatever it is. The second type of conversation I can have is, let's talk about more serious things. How to plan the education of our children. What are we going to do this summer? The third type of conversation is when I tell my wife, tell me about you. I want to know what's in your mind. I want to know what's in your heart. Tell me about you. I want to know you. Torah study is when we say to God, I want to know you. I'm not here to plan my life. That's not about God. It's about me, what type of plan I want to have. Fine, so I involve God in my plan. But eventually, at the end of the day, I'm using God for me and my plan and my life and my meaning in life. That's the second type of conversation. The first type of conversation is even worse. I say to God, hey, come with me to bring me pleasure. That's also not. The ultimate type of conversation is particularly through Torah study that comes to say to God, God, I want to know you. Tell me about you. It's not about me. And God, we know, put his soul into the Torah. you know, we've mentioned this, but the first word of the 10 commandments is Anochi, and the Zohar says Anochi is an acronym for Ana Nafshi Ktavi Tihavi. I, my soul, wrote down and gave it to you. When we study the Torah, we're basically coming to have this third type of conversation with God. God, let us know who you are. We want to know you. That's what Torah study is. Now we can come to that table in many different ways. And we can come and say to God, you know what? I want to know just one part of you. Or we can say, I want to know you through my own lenses, and that's fine. But that's why there's so many Shivim Panim La Torah, 70 faces to Torah study. But still, it boils down to this idea. I want to know God. Yes, Ronnie.
So getting back to Rabbi Eisen's question about, so what is Torah study?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, some people are very close to God, but they don't read, they don't open up the Torah. Can you do Torah study without studying physically the Torah? Can you be close to God? Can you be close to God without studying Torah, without reading, without having conversation about it? Can you do that?
It's very hard, very difficult. Can I know my wife without her sharing her words with me, her personal words with me? So I might know about my wife if I hear through the grapevine.
Does she write those personal words down so you could study them over and over and over again?
Either she writes them, that's one way of communication, or there's other way of direct communication. She says them.
So you don't need to read Torah to study Torah.
If I were able,
is that true? Based on what you just got through saying?
I don't know, because if I were able to hear God speak, and I know God speaks all the time, it would be a different story. I am, thank God, able to hear my wife speak, but to hear God speak is a different level. So,
but there's also
I would have to refer to His written word. That's what I'm saying. His written word is clear that these are His words.
And here is the difficulty. I'm listening to this. The difficulty I have with it, based upon what you talked about, knowing your wife.
Mm-hmm.
From today to 5 years ago to 5 years in the future, it will be a different wife. She will tell you different things, but Torah doesn't change.
Right.
But does it need to change? Does the world change? Do we need to interpret it differently? It seems we're locking ourselves into a way of thinking that this is how it is and this is how it will be and always will be. But the world changes. The world changes. So does our interpretation of Torah need to change based upon modern times? You know.
Right. Good question. I relate to Rabbi Eisen wants to say something. Yes, Rabbi, please. For the Rab.
Well, I've only had one conversation with my wife over the years, and it always ends in "yes, dear." So, you know, but I sort of say that jokingly, but I also say it because when just expanding over when we talk about Torah, are we only talking about Bichtav, the written text? What about Baal Peh, you know, the oral Torah, the way it's applied? And maybe, you know, the study of Torah might not be just opening the book and reading words and seeing who says what, when, where, how, but opening ourselves up to the way it's applied and always wrestling, engaging with it, encountering it.
Right.
And maybe that could be understood as a form of Torah study as well. I mean, I sort of wrestling with this because it's interesting to me.
Right.
Also meaningful.
No, certainly. And I think that answers Ronnie's question part. And that is that when we speak to God and we come to interpret the Torah, as the Talmud does, and then so many other commentaries do, until this very day, right? Well, that's what we do. We do that also for the same purpose, to know God. So my wife can tell me who she is, but I have to ask questions. So what do you mean that you like A, B, and C? Do you like A, B, and C, and D, or just A, B, and C? And what is A and what is B? And that's what the Talmud does. So the Torah is God speaking to us. The Talmud and all other commentaries is us speaking to God, but speaking to God for the same purpose, to know God, and not for my selfish purposes. It's not like that, you know, the guy was dating and he was a narcissist, and for 3 hours he tells this woman everything about him. and I do this and I do this. Narcissist. And after 3 hours, he says to his date, you know what? Enough me speaking about me. What do you think about me? That's the narcissist. So that's not how we approach Torah study. It's the opposite. I really want to know God. I really want to know who my creator is. I want to know who the creator of this world is. I want to know God.
So is
I'm
there,
asking questions to know him.
I have an observation on this conversation that I'd like to share, and it's that there's our inner knowing of God, and how that shapes our inner relationship with ourselves and with God, and also with what we bring into the world. But that's a kind of a, let's say, being, and to read the Torah would then be the doing part, the intellect. It's a different part of our being that will shape then how we relate to the world, and to and it's sort of both feeds, the internal and the external might feed and complement each other. So if you have just the inner knowing, you might be an enlightened jellyfish. And if you have the inner knowing and the mental awareness of the structure and the laws and the intellect, then that shapes what and how you can bring into the world your love, your wisdom, and mitzvah.
Right.
That,
No,
that
certainly.
sort of,
Right. And I love what you're saying, because certainly, I mean, that's that should be the result of my engagement with God, to know God. And it should change me profoundly. I can't remain a jellyfish, like you were saying. It has to really change me after, and it's the same with my wife. So I really seek to know her. I seek to know her so that I can also unite with her. And that unity changes me, changes our relationship altogether.
and as people change year after year after year, and what happens in relationships often is that somebody knows them as that person was 10 years ago and 20 years ago, and they want them to stay that way because that's
how they knew them. Right.
There's a difference between, is there a difference between knowing God and understanding God?
It's a good question. Look, yes, there is, because I would put it this way: knowing God is the gift of the few. Very people know God. Understanding God, many people can understand God and understand at least his ways. But to know God is almost impossible, because the finite being is finite. God is infinite.
I would hope it would have been the opposite.
But
I would have hoped many people know God, but they don't understand God.
I understand. Fine. So if you use knowledge as, okay, I know of him, or I know, I'm using knowledge as knowing his inner depths, his inner thinking, even his inner. I don't think that's possible for finite being. Okay, I misunderstood the word understanding God versus knowing God. Fine. From that standpoint, you're right. I do want to go back to what you were saying, Ronnie, and that is that, yes, people change. And that's why that exercise of trying to know them has to happen all the time. I can't just rely on the person I knew 20 years ago, like you were just saying. But God doesn't change. God is not a human being. God doesn't change. God is that eternal truth. We change. And it's almost like Rabbi Steinsaltz was saying about the prayer book, that, you know, I think I shared this with you a few months ago, but I remember that someone asked Rabbi Steinsaltz why do we pray from the same prayers each and every day? It's boring. We repeat the same prayers each and every day. And Rabbi Steinsaltz responded so poignantly, and he said, you're right. It's the same prayers each and every day, but we change every day. And therefore, the way we look at the prayers changes. And if you don't change every day, then it's not the prayers that are boring. It is you that is boring.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Beautifully
and I would
said.
say it's the same with God. There's this eternal truth. We change every day. And therefore, we have to revisit that relationship each and every day. If we don't change every day, then we're boring.